Awesome. Thank you, guys. I really appreciate it. Super thankful for Insight. I still call you Cardinal Solutions Group. Thank you very much. And thank you very much to Kevin and the Columbus Web Group and Steve. It's no joke. These guys have worked with me intensely for the last 3 months to make sure that this presentation doesn't suck. The first version, if I would have given you guys the first version of this thing I put together, this is way better, and thank God, because I do have a lot of things that I want to say, and I'm going to try and be metered about the way I do that tonight, so bear with me. I'm not a professional presenter. I am rough around the edges, and I kind of like it that way, so hopefully it's all good. So you think you can Agile. That is the title of our presentation. We're here to talk about how you actually work with a team. How do you actually build Agile software? To start and introduce myself, I'm not going to throw my resume and my boring LinkedIn profile at you, but I do want to talk a little bit about my background, because everybody that has a career in Agile has some sort of a different background. They come from somewhere, some different perspective, some different experience, and it helps change the way you actually think. So I started as a consultant. I was a programmer. I was a developer, computer science guy out of Boston University. Started programming on projects, and I worked at the first job for 13 years. My very first job, like a coal miner, a technologist. And I did work in a fixed time, fixed price environment. These are really crazy contracts, 90s, early 2000s, many, many moons ago. And I didn't even realize that I was learning how to be Agile, because with a fixed price and a fixed time, and me and 8 dudes on a client site working directly with the customer, I was solving problems every single day with the customer, direct feedback, learning how to build the right thing, and making damn sure we delivered it on time, right? Because it's on our dime if we're late. So I did about 25 of those projects back to back, and I had just about every role you can imagine on those teams. And it prepared me for the next phase of my life. I feel like I'm so old. I talk about 3 phases of my life. But I always thought as a junior developer, I'm going to be a CTO someday. That was like the dream, like be a CTO. Well, I found myself in that opportunity. I became a CTO of a software company, and then I became CTO of a startup company. Dig.com was kind of like my first big break. I was the San Francisco startup guy. And guess what? As a CTO of a startup, you're wearing a product owner hat. You're wearing a Scrum Master hat. You're the CTO talking to the investors, setting the vision for the company. Project manager, QA manager, whatever, the guy managing everyone else's career in the team. You're doing everything. It's like trial by fire, as typical startups are, right? We have great startups. We have people in the room that are from startups. It's crazy. It's totally fun. It's crazy. And I learned how to take a process and make it as minimum as possible in order to actually create the best outcomes. And so I'm learning from all this experience about how to then apply this to the next phase of my career. How do you take a small company and grow really fast and not screw it up? And so I might compare startups to working with large enterprises. I had the opportunity to work with Dell Software, leading an Agile transformation, working at Chef DevOps at scale, and most recently I was at Chemical Abstracts, and I was the Agile portfolio manager responsible for making the entire company Agile. And so how do you make a whole company Agile? It's crazy, right? Agile transformation. Everyone's probably heard the word. It's not easy. So we'll get into talking about some of that tonight, about Agile transformations, about business agility. In fact, business agility is probably the thing that might be my 4th phase of my career. We'll see if it turns into that. It's really cool. It's the future of agility. So I'm actually building a conference this fall in Columbus around business agility. It would be called Business Agility Midwest here at the Fawcett Center on November 6th and 7th. So I'm happy to talk about all that if anyone's interested. Business agility, it's really fun. So what are we here for tonight? Agile stuff, right? Well, I'm going to start with some storytelling, because Columbus Web Group, like you said, works really hard with me to make sure that this is interesting. He's like, make it personal. Tell a story. Like, let's get to know who Brian Link is. Let's talk about what's my family. What is it like to be me? We'll talk about that. Agile misconceptions is the next thing we'll talk about, because that's how we deal with and learn the foundation. You can't talk about business agility or Agile transformation until you have a baseline. And so we're going to talk about the baseline tonight. And I don't know if you noticed the tagline and all of the social media blitz that our friends at the Columbus Web Group did all over social media the last couple of weeks. This is not another, what did you call it, Kevin? Not just another Agile talk or something like that, right? So I'm going to try and do something a little bit different. My goal is to help people actually learn something that they might be able to use tomorrow. How many people here have actually ever been on an Agile team? You work in software? Okay, good. More than half of you. That's excellent. And those that you haven't, I'm going to try not to use too many three-letter acronyms or buzzwords, so hopefully it all still makes sense. And we'll have plenty of time for Q&A if I'm doing this okay. All right, so storytelling. I've changed the way I'm going to do this. Actually, you know what? I'm going to tell you a side story first. I drove here from Buffalo just now, like rolled in like minutes ago. I've been working on a project up there for a new client. And like when Kevin asked me a few months ago to do this talk, I was like, awesome, this is gonna be great. I was happily unemployed. I had all the time in the world to prepare for this whole talk. And I didn't do a damn thing. And so now, 2 weeks ago, I got this job. It's with Lean Dog. It's an Agile consulting firm out of Cleveland. And they got me on a project up in Buffalo. And it's intense. And I'm doing all this work. And I have no time to prepare for this conference. So Kevin and Steve and Brian and all these guys are like, so when you got time? I'm like, how about like 9 o'clock at night? They're like, cool. So literally, I think the first time I ever did this whole presentation in a kind of a rough draft format that I liked was last night at 9 p.m. after 3 beers. So this is my third one over here. So I think we're okay. I think hopefully I remember some of these things. All right, so storytelling. So he's like, make it personal. Tell us a little bit about who you are. So I said, all right, what if I told the story about my family? My wife and I met late in life in our late 30s. And so we're the old parents. I have a 12-year-old son, and he loves Legos. So I'm like, all right, I'll tell about Legos. And I'm thinking, all right, so he wants it to be personal. He wants it to be about Agile. How can I make this interesting and kind of tell a story about Agile stuff mixed in with Legos? And I'm like, oh, yeah. Well, it's not like when I was a kid, when everything was just like red, blue, and white tiles. Does anyone remember that? They didn't have pictures on boxes. It was just boxes of like red, blue, and red. You guys make me feel great. I'm the oldest guy here. Appreciate that. But now, when you buy Lego boxes, big, you got a Millennium Falcon on the cover. You know exactly what you're building, right? So I was like, let me try and draw some parallels. Hey, it's kind of like, that's the product vision. Brett Buchanan's here from the Columbus Product Club. So it's like a product vision. You know exactly what you're going to build. Everyone's all excited about what you're going to build. And then you empty the box, and what happens? Do all the pieces just spill all over the table? No, they don't anymore. They have little baggies. And they're numbered. Yeah, they used to. But now it's like they got little cute baggies. So I'm thinking, this is like product increments. I could build my product in small little pieces, parts. One little piece of the thing at one time. And so my son, he's a little OCD. You open one package at a time. He wants to separate them all into the same colors, put the weird pieces over here, long pieces over there, and you build your product, right? And I'm thinking, wow, it's like teamwork. We're using, my wife and I, and we're all working together. I'm like, I could tell an Agile story about this. And I'm like, wait a minute. When you actually go to start building it, how do you build an Agile? How do you build a Lego project these days? You buy the big box. How do you know what to build? Instructions. It's a very prescriptive guide, 182 steps. And you got to put them together just right. So the last one we did was a Star Wars Porg. Have you guys seen this? Looks like a penguin, right? Super cool. So excited. It's like foot tall, 182 steps or something. It's like insane. But it's fun. And so we take it out. We're working as a team. I'm like, I could tell a story about teamwork, building this thing as a team. But then you're following a very prescriptive plan. And guess what? The Porg, super cool. It's not just like a truck when I was a kid, but it's like you wiggle the tail and the mouth opens like it's a toy. There's like gears and crap on the inside of these things these days. So I'm like, this is going to be awesome. But there's not an Agile story here because you get to the end and maybe you miss something in step 87 and now you're way down here, right? And the two big pieces just don't go together. And so the wiggling the tail doesn't move the mouth. So your testing is at the end of the process. So I'm thinking, oh, crap. This Lego story is not good. I can't tell the Lego story. It's not Agile. So I went to my wife and I'm like, all right, I'm doing this talk and I got to come up with like a personal story and talk about Agile stuff. And I don't know about you guys, but like my wife barely knows what I do, which is nice because we don't talk about work at home and everything. And she goes immediately, sandcastles. I'm like, what? And when I thought about it, I was like, yeah, sandcastles. Because it's Agile. Think about this. So my family would like to go to the beach. So here's the personal part of the story. Family goes to the beach. We like to rent a big house. You go to the Outer Banks. I've probably been in every beach of the Outer Banks. Love it, right? Everyone goes to the Outer Banks. In Ohio, you see the stickers all over everyone's back window. I've been in all of them. It's awesome. Rent a big house. And at some point during the week, my son and my wife and I are down on the beach and we're building a sandcastle. And what happens? You work as a team. You have an idea. It's a vision. It's a product. You're building this pile of sand. And you scoop it up and you build the thing. And then what happens like 2 seconds later? Big wave comes and knocks over your stupid pile of sand. Like, all right, we're going to start over. It's no big deal. We'll just move back a little bit. We didn't notice the waves, how far they're coming in. So we build another sand. You got to get where it's just wet enough, not dry. It's got to be the sticky kind, right? And you put it together. This time, you adapt. You build a wall out in front of your castle. So that wave is not going to get you this time, right? And you build that moat around your castle. And then my son, he's kind of like a product owner, right? He's like, hey, Dad, let's put some seashells and crap on the outside of the sandcastle. So my wife goes, oh, I'll take that task. And she runs off. And here we are collaborating as a team, trying to build this thing. We all have maybe a different picture in our head about what this thing's going to look like. But we're working on it collaboratively. And so we're almost done. We're putting the thing together. My son has all of his Star Wars action figures. I missed my cues, damn. So he's always got his Star Wars action figures. And, it's going to be King Chewbacca or something on the top of the castle. And he's like, oh, wait. We got to have a lightsaber battle on a staircase on the outside of the castle. So it's a last-minute feature request. And here we go. We're going to build some staircases. No big deal. We'll just all pitch in and start working on it. It's the most important thing, he says. So we're doing it. Side of the shovel, build the staircase. We got lightsaber battle going on and King Chewbacca at the top of the castle. So there you go, sandcastles. Agile geek like me can find a little bit of Agile out in the real world, factoring your life. Originally, I was going to quiz you guys about what's the difference, whatever. He's got both hats, I think, actually. So the interesting thing that I took out of this exercise, personally, was like, it actually is really hard today in this world to know what the heck Agile is. There's so many definitions out there. There's so many different sources of material. What's interesting is just a couple of weeks ago was the anniversary, the 18th anniversary of the Agile Manifesto and the 12 principles. And at that time, just 18 short years ago, feels short for an old guy like me, the entire body of knowledge of Agile in the universe fit on one piece of paper. And now you can get a certificate, you can get training, you can go around the world, and there's conferences everywhere, and there's like gigantic, it's so confusing, it's no wonder there's misconceptions around Agile. So that's why I'm here today, is to talk about the misconceptions around Agile and these basics. We actually have to unlearn some of these myths and some of these weird things that people think about Agile in order to actually know what the mindset is. What is Agile? It's a mindset about being iterative and adaptive. And unlike WATERFALL, where we used to lie to ourselves and say, I know exactly what I'm going to be doing 10 months and 3 days from now. We're going to be doing task number 794, right? That was the project plan. It looked beautiful. I knew exactly what I was going to be doing. We represent the opposite of that. We know damn well that's not going to happen, but we know what we're doing next week. And that's what Agile is all about. It's about knowing that you're going to build the most important thing next for the sake of the customer and the value and all those things. So how do we actually unlearn these things? Well, I've heard so much stuff working with so many different teams and different environments that I found some themes kind of percolating in my head. And I finally decided to write them down. So that's what we're doing today. I actually wrote a book about this stuff. I don't get excited. I'm not like famous published author or anything. This is like a sorry excuse of a book. It's like 35 pages long or something. It's a PDF. with a PayPal button I coded myself. But it's a book, and it's on the interweb, so it's on my LinkedIn profile. I'm a published author now. So, but what I did was I took these things that are common myths that people repeat, that people hear out there all the time. And the book is actually pretty simple. I've got a bunch of intro pages, like 5 or 10 intro pages, and then I take one page per myth or misconception. And it's like a picture book. There's one big picture, and then there's like 3 short paragraphs. But I have a bunch of links to published authors, thought leaders, recognized leaders in the space to help you dig deeper and learn what the world is saying about these things. So that what my goal is for you to hear some of these crap statements and know what the truth is instead, and actually have some reference points to point them to the people that are famous in the world to know this stuff better than I do. So what I want to do is I want to quickly ask you guys, you know what I'm talking about? Do you have any stories? Have you ever worked for like a pointy-haired boss, like a Dilbert dude, that had like a misconception about Agile? Or maybe you've worked hand in hand with a PMP project manager that just got his Agile certification. He thinks he's awesome about Agile. Maybe a Scrum Master got certified yesterday, doesn't know what he's talking about yet, but is telling you what to do. Have you worked with anybody? Have you heard anything? Does anyone have any ideas what I'm talking about when I say misconception? Yeah. Okay, okay. So yeah, the mechanics of the ceremony. Does that make you Agile? Okay. What else? Anyone else hear anything? Oh yeah, it's chaos. You can do anything you want anytime, right? There's no process. What else? All right. Don't strain your brains. I'm going to go through half of them. Half of the things in my book. This is the list that I came up with. And it's not just my ideas. These are things that I've researched and heard. There's a lot of people that are blogging about top 10 lists of misconceptions and whatnot. And they're all in my book with pictures and large font for anyone to read. So here's one. Agile makes you go faster. Have you ever heard that? I've heard executives say that. And I think they actually believe it. I think they think that the same people with the same amount of time is going to do like more work. They think it's like magic. Oh, we're Agile. We're going to go faster. You're like, no, you're not going faster. What is it? You're going to get feedback sooner. You're going to deliver quicker. You're going to actually give code to customers sooner. And that might feel faster. So it's like a subtlety, right? I'm like mincing words a little bit here. It's a misnomer. But I think if you understand this, you do less more often, it makes sense to me. Like this is how you iterate. You get feedback quicker. So the way I'm going to kind of run the next sort of section of this talk is that I've got these different themes, and then I'm going to give you like this little nugget of maybe something you can use tomorrow, I hope. And then I'm also going to tell you a little something that maybe you should follow up on later, or something else you might want to learn that's related. So how do you actually do more less often, or do less more often? Well, in order to actually operate and build code inside of a sprint, you actually need to do all the things. You need to estimate, you need to design, you need to write the code, you need to test this way and this way and that way, and then publish the code, or at least be able to publish the code inside of your sprint boundaries. And the only way you can do that is if you have a definition of done that makes sense. And so that definition of done is something that you could, with your teams, work on tomorrow to make sure that you're striving for that level of capability to publish code every boundary. And one of the ways that you can do that, and the way that enables that, is through automating all of the things. So if you, instead of manually testing, which takes a lot of time, you figure out how to automate these things. You use tools like Selenium and Cucumber and all the stuff to help build your unit tests. And then you string them together with integration tests and end-to-end tests. So test-driven development is kind of the critical piece to help that. You mentioned this before. People think, there's no process, it's sheer chaos. And you know what? When you saw the big, thick design documents and you saw the Gantt charts and the project plans that told you exactly what you're doing 10 months and 3 days from now, you probably did think that there was a process. And so it looks really slippery, like these guys are just winging it. They're like doing whatever the heck they want next week. And so it feels like there's no process. But the reality is there's a lot of rigor. You're doing all the same things. There's risk management. There's all these things that you're designing, you're developing, you're testing. You've got all the skills in the team. You've got people doing the blockers. You've got all the same stuff that happens. It just feels different. And it's more iterative. So the advice I have for you is use the process. Rely on the process. If you're just learning, you're just figuring this out, you know that there's a daily stand-up. You know that there's maybe a demo at the end of the sprint. But this retro, some people get lazy, get comfortable. You're like, hey, it's kind of like it was last week. We're all good. You want to skip the retro this week? And they do. But the thing is, like, you should challenge yourself. Be like, how can we be better? Like, maybe we suck at our estimating. We should actually talk more and stuff. And just that little idea of talking to each other more is super important. And you can actually build a better process just by using the retrospective. Okay. So a retrospective is one of the 4 Agile ceremonies in the Scrum. And it's a way where you commit to trying to improve your process. As a team, you get together and you talk about what could we do differently next sprint. So it's self-improvement. So this is funny. There's a lot of people that use Scrum. And I heard Faye Thompson, who's an Agile coach in Columbus, say she polls audiences whenever she does speaking engagements. Who's here has read the Scrum guide? Who's used Scrum? And she's appalled, like hardly anybody does. This is a 14-page document, and it's really easy to read. In fact, it's right here. And it'll probably take like 15 or 20 minutes to read it. So, I don't know, Brett, you want to like take some time and read this for this right now? You can send it. We're all here. You might as well. I'm just But no, seriously, you should. You should totally read the Scrum guide. If you're using Scrum, you will learn a lot. I hear Agile coaches and Scrum Masters say all the time that just by revisiting the Scrum guide, they're reminded of the principles and values and things and the reasons why Agile works for you. And it's available for free online, scrumguide.org, I think. So Scrum. Everyone talks about Scrum all the time. So much so that people think it's like the only thing. Like, it's the only way to be Agile is Scrum. Deloitte, the consulting company, publishes something every year. I don't know how often, actually. And it's like a subway map of Agile processes. There's a whole universe of Agile processes out there besides Scrum. And they're in families of like Lean and Kanban and ways to scale Scrum and sophisticated scaling strategies like SAFe, the Scaled Agile Framework. There's XP, Extreme Programming. There's all these different categories of ways that you can use tools in your toolbox. Now, if you're a startup, you might not need to know all these tools. But if you're in a big company or you're an Agile coach or you're a Scrum Master, like there's a whole universe of tools to use. So anyway, I think it's funny that people think that Agile equals Scrum, but it totally doesn't. But I do suggest, I like to call Scrum the Agile training wheels, right? This is like, you're getting started, you need to know how to do it. What can I do to just get going? Well, you got 4 ceremonies. You do your sprint planning, you meet every day to talk about stuff during your sprint stand-up, and you, at the end of the sprint, you talk about what you did, and you show all your stakeholders, and then you do your retrospective, and you talk about how to improve doing it again, and you just keep doing it again. And you have a product owner that represents the business, and they're going to help build your backlog, which is basically your list of things to do, and you write things in user stories. I could talk about a lot, and we'll get into some of this. Sorry, my throat keeps trying. So follow Scrum verbatim at first, because everyone needs training wheels at first, right? But then, as you get more mature, as you know what the heck you're doing, you have a little more flexibility. And this is, everyone heard this? Has anyone heard this? Like, it's called Shu-Ha-Ri. It's some sort of martial art thing. I wish I knew which kind of martial art it came from, but it's like it's like a maturity model. So I like to mix my metaphors when I tell this story, but it's like Karate Kid. He learned how to wax on and wax off. He had no idea why he was learning to wax Miyagi's car, right? but he was doing the motions. He was learning the rules. He was understanding the mechanics. And then eventually he learned that it was whatever, to help defend himself and be flexible or whatever the heck he was doing, right? He learned how to apply those rules and actually use them to his advantage. Well, then I think as you mature, you learn how to apply these rules, you understand them, you know why they exist. Eventually, as you become awesome at this stuff, you become like a Yoda Jedi master, right? And now you understand the philosophy and the religion and why these rules were built in the first place. And now you can break the rules because you understand them. So this sort of philosophy, this concept, also applies to Agile. So start with the training wheels before you actually start breaking the rules. There's a lot of teams out there that go, we'll skip the retro. Who cares about daily stand-up? We'll do it twice a week. And the reality is there's a reason why you do it, because it helps build the rhythm, understand why you're building software the way you are. This one's popular. There's no documentation in Agile. If you've ever been in a waterfall project, anyone ever create that 2-inch thick requirements document after months and months of work? Those people show up on your project like, where's your requirements document? Like, we kind of don't do that. Like, do we need to document anything? Yeah, you need to document things. You just do it the same way we do everything else, iteratively, one little step at a time. We document what we need to do what we're doing next. You don't have to document all the stuff. You're going to be wrong about what you're doing 10 months and 3 days from now. I don't know why I picked that. So everyone wants the documentation, but you write it incrementally. So here's the takeaway. So if you're working on an Agile team and you have user stories, those are your requirements. That's the little pieces of functionality that you're building for your product. But they have to be in customer terms. This is not a technical how-to guide. It's the customer wants some stuff. They need to be able to do a thing. And so we use this language to keep it in customer terms. As a certain kind of user, I'd like to be able to do a certain kind of thing so that I can accomplish some sort of outcome, achieve some kind of greatness, whatever. And so by writing it that way, it forces you to separate product mentality of building stuff for the customer that's driven by the product owner on the team, and the team that gets to actually decide how to implement it. Product owner goes, yeah, build me a PDF download thing. And the team goes, well, I guess we need like database stuff and RESTful APIs and whatever the heck. And the two don't need to know about each other's worlds, right? You can laugh at me all you want, it's all good. So something to look up, because this stuff is complicated, but there's a 15-minute video out there that I've been showing to my client recently, and it's really powerful. It shows this flow of the product owner inventing what's important and flowing the work through the team, and the team managing their work in progress, and the team building stuff and releasing code, and how it creates a feedback loop. And it's kind of like an animated video, so you watch the hand draw the cartoons like as it goes through. It's like 15 minutes long. And it actually gets into some of the stuff about predicting deadlines in the future, which is really hard to do in Agile. We'll get to that. But yeah, search for Agile product ownership in a nutshell. You'll find it. Oh, it's so easy. I could probably teach anybody that's never done it here before in like 5 minutes. Maybe you already learned more about Agile than you knew when you walked in here. Like, people think it's easy, right? It's so easy. We're instant experts. Well, yes, it actually is easy to learn, but it's hard to master. And it's hard to figure out how to execute and get good at it. So the reason why people get good at this, the reason why you can be good at Agile, is because your team has learned how to communicate. It seems like such a simple thing, right? Like, if you know why you're building something, and if your team knows how to talk about that thing you're building, then you should be able to build it pretty well and ask questions. And that's where the rub comes in, right? Because probably more than half of us are involved in technology at all. And sometimes it's hard to raise your hand and say, guys, that's kind of dumb. Or like, I'm not sure that that matches what the product owner said we should do. Like, you got to stick your neck out. But if you work in a great team, that's psychological safety. That is the recognition that everyone's voice counts. And it helps your whole team gel and create this like magic. The sum is greater than the whole. The sum of the parts is greater than the whole. Actually, my favorite story to tell about this is Google, right? So Google decided that they were in their like, you know, algorithm world and like, and they wanted to find out what's the secret formula for building the best software development team. I've read the paper. I'm pretty convinced that they thought when they started this project, interviewing 1,000 teams, that they'd come up with, the ones with the biggest brains and the shiniest propellers, right? But they studied all the teams and they took an objective look at what makes a great software team. And they found that it's not the technology, it's not how many PhDs are on the team or whatever. It's, do they have psychological safety? Can the people raise their hand and talk about the stuff? Like, that's the most important thing of the whole damn team. It's amazing. So that's my suggestion to you. And the advice is, like, how do you do that? How do you actually create psychological safety? You're not doing trust falls and things like that. But, like, maybe in your meeting, you go, hey, dude, you haven't said anything. Do you happen to have another point of view that we haven't talked about yet? Just asking that question. And if you're afraid of putting your introvert friend on the spot, you just ask the generic question. Like, does anyone else have an opposing point of view we haven't talked about? That one question can help change the dynamics of your whole team. Because that one guy is just a little bit afraid to raise his hand and say, yeah, it's dumb, right? But maybe he does. And maybe he just joined the team yesterday and he's got this crazy cool idea and it changes the product. Maybe all of a sudden the product has a new feature or does something different and it makes the company more money and the customer's happier. I mean, like, these things are all connected. That's why it's powerful. All right, so the more complicated, crazy thing, understand about what makes great teams and how do you produce more stuff and build things more automated. These ideas of continuous integration and continuous delivery. If you automate all of the things so that you don't have to copy code to production, you don't have to manually test stuff and all this stuff, right? You know what I'm talking about. Yeah, exactly. Then the team can focus on the work. They can focus on solving the customer problems. All right, this one's kind of silly. But I've worked for companies where they're like, hey, just because we break all of our crap down into 2-week slices, we're agile. Am I agile just because I use sprints? So, no, of course not. The mindset is important. And the most valuable thing is actually doing all the steps inside of your sprint and producing the actual work product at the end. And being able to, you don't have to always push code at the end or during the middle of your sprint, but being in the process to do that is what makes your process powerful. So you should use the sprint as your control. Write your definition of done. Make sure you're actually solving all the problems and releasing code, able to release code at the end of your sprint. As a team, there's this concept of velocity. Like, how fast can you actually go as a team is measured by how much stuff can you do. And if you know how much stuff you can do, you can kind of predict how much stuff you'll be able to do in the future. And the better you are at capturing those metrics, the better you'll be at projecting and guessing how much stuff you'll be able to do a few months from now. So sprints are helpful that way. Which leads to another awesome topic that if you've ever worked in an agile team, the big dumb executive always says, I want a pile of features on an exact date with the exact same people that I already gave you. And it's like, it's impossible, dude. You can't do that. But what you can do, so you can't hold people to a deadline in agile, but you can predict a range. You can give deadlines. If you're tracking those things, hey, in 2 weeks we can do 10 things. And we got 100 things in the backlog, and we're really good at slicing them to small pieces that are easy to estimate and easy to build and easy to deploy. Well, we know in 10 sprints, we can probably get close to doing that. But if you're really smart, you'd be like, the lowest we ever did was 8, and the most we ever did was 12. So you can build this thing, two-dimensional graph, right? And you got this thing they call a cone of uncertainty. You can predict within a range, the big pile of stuff you want in 6 months, you kind of get it to you maybe within June or July. And that needs to be good enough. So stop promising exact dates and coach the people that you work with, the managers, to stop promising those dates. Another tool that you can use that you should look up that does accomplish the same kind of thing is burn up and burn down charts. It's worth looking into if you haven't used them before. This one's obvious. Where's your QA team? You don't have any testing in Agile, right? Since there's no testing team, maybe no one's testing. Of course you need testing, right? But they're on the team. So you have to have testing, and everyone's responsible for testing. It is exactly how you accomplish these big, complicated things, putting the right skills people on the team to be able to pull off whatever you're doing. The thing that people neglect to do, though, is everyone's always cutting corners because you're meant to refactor. You're meant to build the skateboard before the scooter, before the electric scooter, before the car. And you're supposed to go, well, that old code doesn't matter anymore. We need to build this new thing, right? And so you have to say and call it out. The technical team has to talk to the product owner to say, you know that corner we cut last week? We need to put that in our backlog too, so we don't forget about it. And that's what technical debt is. The stuff that you did kind of quickly that needs to be replaced. To have a really healthy testing pyramid, this is the idea of test coverage, of unit testing, and then less integration tests and less end-to-end tests that are all connected. Martin Fowler does a much better job than me trying to describe that. I highly suggest you look this up if you have any interest in QA and automating testing. Martin Fowler's Practical Test Pyramid is a fantastic reference. Architecture. People say you can't possibly build a complex architecture in 2-week chunks. Well, right, you can't build the whole damn application in 2 weeks either, right? So yes, you have to have architecture, but you have to be smart about it. But the point is, even if you think in the future you might need to support 5 million users or whatever, like, you're in the alpha stage, you only have 5 users. So like, build some ramshackle thing that supports your 5 users and make sure you got the product right first. And then you can make it fancier later. And you can work with your senior architects to actually build these things they call enablers or architectural runway and do things incrementally. There's a really good reference out there in Scaled Agile Framework that talks about Agile architecture. And it's a really excellent reference to kind of help your team figure out how to tackle these big problems. All right, so I just covered like half of my book basically, and that's the foundation. Let's assume that you're all awesome now. You all know everything you need to know about this foundation of being Agile on a team. Well, you're just one team, maybe. Maybe you work at a big company. Maybe there's, I don't know, 50 or 60, or in my current client, 250 teams that have to get good. How do you do that? This is when we start talking about transformations. And it's complicated, right? So you got to start with a foundation. Otherwise, you can't possibly have a successful Agile transformation. And I might describe how to be successful in about 9 buckets. And there's like, you could write like doctorate theses on all the stuff that's here. So I'm going to gloss over it really quickly. If you have questions, I'm happy to talk about it. But you have to change culture. If you've ever been in a transformation, you know that that's probably the biggest barrier. Our humans, like, we suck. You have to tell people things 7 times before they change and that kind of stuff. But stick them together in a community and maybe they learn from each other. Teach your managers how to stop telling teams what to do, but be there to support the teams. You have a better chance of success. Some companies don't even have stable teams. They tear down their teams and they put them back up with a project mentality. So shifting to a product mentality where you fund your teams, the CIO of my current client says, teams are our future currency. It's awesome. It's inspirational. It's like, yeah, you want this team to keep building stuff? How about next month? You still want to keep building it? Oh, no, we want to add more teams. Awesome. That's our currency. We know how we're going to do stuff. And that's what portfolio management is, helping make decisions at a macro level about which products to build and how many teams do we need. Change management is obvious. Organizational change management, just don't hide it in HR where a lot of companies do, and put it right front and center to help people know how to adapt to the changes. And like I said, when you have multiple teams building the same product, for example, you got to deal with this concept of scaling. How do you share a backlog of a list of things to do with 8 teams. It's complicated. And there's ways to actually help teams do that and collaborate and work together. Scaling, scaled Agile, all kinds of things on top of Scrum will help you scale Agile. Okay, so I've rambled long enough. We have a couple of things left to cover, just maybe themes, if you will, of takeaways, things that we've talked about that you can maybe take with you. So face-to-face interactions is right in the manifesto. Humans talking together, building psychological safety. Like, if you're at your desk and you have a question, you don't have to send an email, just walk over and talk to them. Collaborate more frequently, and you'll be surprised at how much helpful that is. In some companies, the culture is to hoard their skill set and not share it, right? But a successful team is going to share those skills. They're going to help the testers teach the developers how to be better, etc. And if everybody on the team knows why they're building something and has the safety to raise their hand and challenge assumptions, I guarantee you that team is going to build a better product. And don't skip your retrospectives. Focus on what can we do better. Like, sure, we suck at estimating. Let's do something different this week. Let's try something. Let's experiment. The Agile process is meant to experiment. All right, so that's all the stuff that I had to share. I'm all over the interwebs here. I can kind of cover some of the places we have here. That's my email. I run a consulting company, Practical Agilist. Yeah. Okay, great. Yeah, we have times for Q&A. We'll get started here in just a second. I blog about transformation crap all the time out on Medium. My Twitter handle is BlinkDaddy. And surprise, I'm not trying to make money off this book. I'm just trying to share knowledge. If you can memorize this URL, bit.ly, Columbus Web Group Agile, or find me online, you can download it for free this week. Hope you enjoy it. Love the feedback if you could tell me about it.
So before we take some questions from the audience, again, if you missed those links, since this will get posted on YouTube, you can obviously find those. You can go back to the YouTube video, get that links in order to get in contact. One question that I had for you based on your discussion was you said after you move from the basics of Agile, you have those like 9 big buckets, right? And one of the biggest things that change about Agile is culture. Mm-hmm. So if we're thinking like day to day, like what can you all do tomorrow? What are some of the easiest things that people can do the next day to change the culture of their teams?
Nothing. No, it's legitimately very hard. I talk a lot about building this Agile community of practice. Now, I happen to have been in a position at Chemical Abstracts where I was able to go to sort of the VP of engineering and say, dude, can I like spend $100 on pizza every month and like get people together to talk about Agile? And that's how we started. It was that simple. I was like, I'm just bringing like stickies and magic markers and buying pizza. Come on along and let's talk. And we had this sort of lean coffee conversation. We just scribbled on whiteboards. We had people come and say, I'd like to talk about this. And people would show up and they'd bitch about the problems they have in their project and they'd ask questions because they didn't know what they were talking about. But we had people kind of sharing things with each other. And it's like serendipity happens when you just pull a large group of people together. And that's culture. Actually, one of the companies I worked at said, because culture is this mysterious thing, right? Culture is nothing more than the sum total of all the conversations between all the employees. I thought that was really profound. That means you can impact it by just having a positive attitude, or as a manager, talking to all your direct reports in a certain way and changing the way you act. So culture can be impacted in small ways, just like that.
Sure. You got a really big reaction when you described your Twitter handle as BlinkDaddy.
Yeah.
Going to why you're BlinkDaddy?
Yeah, I'm not a rap star. I'm not on YouTube.
Yes.
But yeah. Please like this video. So it's funny. So like I'm an early adopter in all the social media channels and whatnot because I'm an idiot. And back in 2005 or 6 or something, right before I started working at Dig, I was just sitting around the living room one day and I was like, what should my handle be? And like my whole life, with my name like Brian Link, my email address has always just been blank. So my wife blurts out of the kitchen while she's making dinner, blank. And at the time, my son was like a toddler, and he walked by and he went, Daddy! So I was like, that's good. I can do that. So off you go. And then you're forever Blink Daddy. So.
You're going to have to come up with a sexier story if you want a rap career.
Yeah.
So that's a great starting place. So I noticed there's a couple people with questions. So we'll take a few of those so you guys can ask Brian.
Sure. Thanks for giving the talk. So you talked a lot about operational frameworks and how people can work together.
Yeah.
What's the role of the customer? Where does the customer fit into Agile, Scrum, DevOps?
That's an awesome question. You kind of can't build anything without a customer, right? And whether the customer is your end user or like an e-commerce Amazon buyer or whatever, like you need to have the customer involved. The voice of the customer should be represented by the product owner on the team, product manager. They represent that. And ideally, they're the ones, together with the team, that are actually talking to customers. You'd be surprised at how many companies in town just don't talk to their customers. And so I would challenge you to actually get out there and ask permission, because usually somebody owns the customer and all the politics and things and that happen inside companies. But like, can we like talk to some customers and make sure this is okay? And that's what I did at my last job. And you know, the UX people were like freaking out because they're like, oh, UX research, we got to do it a certain way. And I'm like, I'm not doing UX research. I just want to talk to them and show them a prototype of what we're doing to see if they like it at all or if we're dead wrong, right? And so we did that. I labeled it like customer development program. And like, we just scheduled meetings with customers and we just showed them stuff. And we're like, what do you think? You like A or B? And it was so powerful and so helpful. And they were like, thank God, we felt so privileged that they're involved. But the product owner made that happen because they understood and knew that they needed to be connected with them. Yeah. Excellent. Yeah, he was asking about how do you get connected to the customer? You'll be interviewed later. Hi, I'm Brian.
Yes. Congratulations, Blink Daddy.
Thank you.
You really inspired something in somebody who's not familiar with this concept or process.
Great.
Thank you. For someone that's familiar with like corporate environments, how do you incorporate a model or process like this that's very kind of youth, new, orient focused into like a old style corporate environment? Like this is the way that we always.
Oh my God! And that's exactly where it is. Everywhere they're like that. In fact, at Chemical Abstracts, I loved that job. They're wonderful people. They're a 111-year-old company, and if anyone works here at AEP, they're also an old company. And there's this culture, right, where, well, maybe Agile's a fad. Maybe it'll blow over, right? Maybe it's like object-oriented code in the 90s. It'll be gone before a while, right? Well, like things, at least somebody got it. Yeah, thank you. So it doesn't change overnight, but it takes leadership from the top to kind of turn the needle, push it just far enough. There's a saying in sort of Agile transformation circles where you can only influence the change in the organization as high as you have sort of authority to do so. So if you've got a director, then maybe those 6 teams under that director can be awesome. But the people over in this other division, they got nothing. But if the VP or the CTO or the entire executive board say we're doing it, then it's magic. Then all of a sudden everyone's on board and they're like, well, my boss's boss's boss said we're doing it, so I guess we're doing it. Otherwise, they will resist change. And you know, think about your own personality. If someone tells you to do something, but you don't report to them, you're less likely to do it probably. So you have to have that sort of leadership support. Yeah.
Can you give a little hint on your business agility comment at the beginning where you said there's some future?
So businessagilitymidwest.com is the conference I'm putting on in November. And my mission this year, on top of doing a number of other side jobs and day jobs, is to put on a conference in Columbus and to uplift our knowledge about business agility. Transformations are hard enough. And so if you can change the entire company to be agile, it's like monumental. You have to have leadership from the very top. But it starts with education. Because if you went to any executive and said, hey, do you think we should set the budget in stone? We don't have a damn idea what we're doing 11 months from now. They go, yeah, I know, it's a bunch of lies. We get it. Like, well, there's agility for finance people. There's a book called Beyond Budgeting. And if I can educate the CFO of Limited Brands and Gap and whatever else we have in town to say, hey, just adjust your budget quarterly. There's a way to do that. You can actually implement agility in marketing, in HR. What if your HR people actually work directly with the teams to fill your skill gaps? Like, I don't know about you guys, but HR is usually on the other side of the building. They have no idea, like, you got to write a job description, you're trying to hire something they've never done before. They have no idea what you actually need in the team. Agile HR, there's books about this stuff that actually help coach them on how to be more nimble and be more agile to serve the team. If the team is the currency of the whole company, finance, marketing, agile, everyone has to fall in line in order for the company to become agile. And so the world's getting there, but it feels like bleeding edge. Like, I'm so passionate about this. I feel like the opportunity is bigger than the internet. There's trillions of dollars of waste, lean waste. If you think about every pet project, every guy that's wasting time at his desk, doesn't even know what he's doing, people that show up for their first day of work and don't get a laptop for 8 weeks, they're just sitting around. Like, there's so much waste in this world, it's insane. And a little bit of agility everywhere could fix that. Yeah.
You talked a little bit about estimation. I'd love to hear a little bit more about that. And I saw your LinkedIn profile a little bit about hashtag no estimates.
Yeah.
I'd like to hear your perspective.
Dude, that's a very long story. I should probably do that over a beer with you. Estimation is the idea that, very simply, you do relative estimating. So if I were to say, hey, the whole team goes, a login screen is some front-end crap, some middle layer stuff, and some database crap, maybe some logic and security. Let's call that 10 points. And then months from now, I go, hey, we got to build this like accounting integration thing or whatever. And you go, is it bigger or smaller than that bread box? And they go, oh, that's really complicated. It's like 7 times as hard as a login screen. It's 70 points. Okay, great. Now we know that's a big thing. We got to break it down into smaller things. So estimating is always relative, and that's how story points work. No estimate says if a team's awesome, they can break anything down to a small enough slice that it's almost always the same. We can do 14 things every sprint because we always define the work the same small slice. There's another meetup group in town called Agile Sashimi. People talk about this all the time. Ryan Ripley is the guy that talks about no estimates all the time. You should look him up. And he talked about this all the time. If you can slice things really small, then it makes your work very predictable. And it's risk management. Because what if one thing out of 100 blows up out of proportion? It's 3 times as hard. Well, it's tiny, so who cares? Everything else is going to probably average out.
We have time for like 1 or 2 more questions. Go for it.
Do you have any more tips on how you can practice helping people, in that meeting environment feeling safe to say, hey, this is dumb, besides asking that generic question?
Yeah, and it's really easy for me to say you should say that, but it's very personal, right? And some people are not going to want to be called out on the spot. And as a Scrum Master or a team member working alongside these people, you should judge their personality to know whether you can call them out, whether you have that level of friendship with them on the team or not. And if you don't, have a one-on-one conversation with them afterwards. Be like, we really have to work on trying to make sure that we're all participating. And more often than not, you're not sharing. And have a heart-to-heart. Like, there's crucial conversations, there's radical candor, there's all these things. There's great books on psychological safety. So I'd encourage you to read the books because they'll teach you better than I could. But it's about being respectful and expecting to earn trust before you command it of others.
What do you do when Agile kind of starts to show hints of falling apart in your team, or the high intensity, high pressure situations start to affect it?
Yeah, it's a good question. There's a lot of companies that have tried Agile and failed, and it's usually because they don't have the key ingredients for success. You have to have some level of leadership support. If you're just a bunch of scrappy dudes trying to code Agile crap like because you feel like it, it's probably not going to be long lasting. But if you have the support of an Agile coach or a manager or the people that everyone reports to, all of a sudden you have that servant leadership support to actually help move things out of your way, remove the blockers. The team has to be in it too. And so if you're the first team in a big company being Agile, you kind of better select the right people, because you're only as good as all the people involved. And if you have people that are just dead set against it, it's probably not your first team to start trying to be Agile. But it's contagious once you get somebody doing it well. They're like, I want to work like those people. They're pushing code every other day. They're having fun. They're shooting Nerf guns at each other and stuff. It's cool over there, right?
How far up the org structure do you think Agile practice should go?
It needs to go all the way. But what's inevitable is that our executives get these things last. Unless you're lucky, like my current client, the CIO of Capital One came in and said, we're changing the whole damn thing, and it's amazing. But it's rare. And so getting like some sort of a director, some sort of a VP to support a whole section of the Agile development teams, to support them, creates a kernel of success. And once somebody hears that they're producing 0 defects, that they're actually having fun, that they're only working 40 hours, and they're prioritizing their work to do what's most important for customers, and then customers actually like it, and you get feedback, and they have 0 support tickets, like all of a sudden the data speaks for itself. And it's a miracle. But it's actually not that hard if you do the right things, right?
Okay. Unfortunately, we have to wrap up because we're getting near the end of our time here. If you do have questions, please feel free to reach out to Brian. But on top of it, we are headed downstairs afterwards to continue conversations. So if you want to talk about psychological safety, I taught middle school for 10 years, so I know all about that.
Yes.
But we're going downstairs to the three-legged mare, which coincidentally was my nickname in high school. So
Nice bookend.
clean up after yourselves. We have recycle bins here and outside. Another round of applause for Brian and his team.
Thanks, Brian.
Appreciate it. Thank you.